So welcome back. This next section is also going to be a kind of brief section, but it's going to talk about getting help. So you as CI users will inevitably get stuck on issues that are going to stop your progress for one reason or another. It happens to everyone. So the goal of this talk is going to find a way to reduce the amount of time and effort that you need to address problems, minimize your frustration, and make sure that your productivity increases. So in the talk, I'm going to discuss kind of how you're going to triage your problem, how to identify the best solution, and then if and when you should escalate it beyond either yourself or your teammates, and when to go to a help desk. And when you are working with a help desk, how to best utilize them. Oh, sorry about that. So, as I mentioned, we're going to focus on the best way to get help. I want to start by saying the user support, regardless of what's going on, is always there to help you. However, when you go to them, it's to make sure that you get the best use of your time and their time. It's important to kind of know what you're doing when you get there. It should be noted that there are far more users than there are support staff, and that be that SDFC or any other support center that you might be working with. The other thing to consider is that when you're working with support staff, if you send in a ticket and they open that ticket, you have their 100% undivided attention. So making sure that all the information is in there is really key, because if they need to start iterating back and forth, once that email is sent off, they're context switching, going to somewhere else. So until they can come back and start working with you again, it is going to take time. So what we're going to kind of talk about is kind of your workflow when you run into a problem, how to kind of work through your problem and to identify what actually is going on. Once you've identified what's going on, what are the resources you have available to you, and which is the most appropriate resource to use. Finally, we'll focus specifically on the help desk and how to get the most out of them. And then I'm going to talk about some common issues we have. We have a help desk ticket, and many of the tickets we get are fairly simple, and by showing them to you like before they happen, you can easily resolve your issues and don't need to submit a ticket. Not that we don't want to talk to you all, but it'll reduce time. So what are the steps you take when you encounter a problem? A lot of times we're going to get tickets that just say, I have my job's not running. Can you help? And of course we can help you, but if we don't have any information, our first thing to do is going to send back a ticket and say, hey, so what's going on? You know, who are you? What system are you on? What have you? So by taking a step back and kind of looking at this by yourself first makes it so you reduce the amount of time that you need to interact with us. So the first thing you're going to do is identify the issue kind of on a high level. So what is your problem? Is it an access issue? Can you not get to the system itself? Is it a permission issue? Are you unable to get to files or file systems? Is it a code issue? Is it a scheduler issue? There's so many issues that we can have. Like I said, CI is super involved and it contains lots of issues with, or lots of components to it. So it could be any of the many things that are out there. Once you've kind of identified the high level issue, you kind of want to drill down and find this very specific error message. So if you're running jobs, is it returning a specific error? Does that specific error, is it code dependent? Does say there's a segmentation fault, or this file is not available, or is it system dependent? You know, what is a system dependent problem? Oh, the file size, they can't find the file system, or running out of memory type issue. So depending on what the specific error is going to help you identify who the correct person that you want to help, that will be there to help you resolve the issue. So what are your available resources? As you all should be aware by now, advanced cyber infrastructure is really complicated and contains a lot of components. So not only are you talking about the systems you're running on, you're talking about the software you're using, you're talking about the domain science that is going on. There's lots of things, but very few people kind of understand the whole round trip of everything that's going on. So Does everyone understand the network? Does anyone understand the file system? So identifying what the issue is. And again, there are some people who are specific, even within our support staff. While our support staff, nobody knows everything, there are certain support staff who have very good handle on some specific aspects. So again, that being said, one of the best places to start is kind of looking at yourself and what you know about what's going on. Walk yourself through the issue. What have I seen? A lot of times what was the process that got yourself to where you are? Have I run this code before? Did I just copy this code from somewhere else? Kind of use yourself as a good tool to understand your problem so that if you need to go beyond yourself, you understand it best. I think way back when I was young, there was a thing called, there was a G.I. Joe cartoon. I don't know if anyone's old enough to remember that, but at the very end, they always had this learning moment that they discussed. And they had a couple kids talking and something happened. And in the end, one kid would say, "Oh, and now I know." And everyone else would say, "And knowing is half the battle." And that really is true. Understanding what's going on is halfway there to finding a resolution. So sometimes we've been working so hard on a program that even though we're looking at the code, we're seeing what we expect to see and not what is actually there. So with code, very often there'll be a slight, you added a period, you added a space, something like that. So very often taking advantage of your colleagues or the people physically closest to you is useful because they can kind of do a sanity check and they can just be a second set of eyes. The other time where your lab mates or your project mates are really good resources is when in some labs, everyone uses the same codes. So it's very possible that your lab mate or someone else in the lab itself has already run into the issue that you're coming, that you've run up against and will know a quick solution for you. While your colleagues and your lab mates are great resources, there are times when you definitely don't want to go to them for help. In some cases, a software code could have been developed on a laptop in-house and written for, you know, a couple 10 files running on one core. However, you decide, well, you want to speed up your process and do this on bigger, so we're going to put this on the HPC system. When you're using the HPC system, when you're running on hundreds of cores and using thousands of files, how you use the system could inadvertently affect the system itself. So make sure when you go that you go to an expert for scaling up. Again, by going to someone who's not well versed in what's going on, you could cause more problems than resolve. The next thing that's at your fingertips is always the web. For software problems, for some of the tools we have, so like Singularity, for our schedule, our Slurm scheduler, there's more community forums out there that are very good, and I'd highly recommend checking in on them. If you have software specific, the software developers are the most knowledgeable about what their software can do. And in some cases, if we have the software on our system, we don't actually have the code to modify it. We only get the executable. So if there is an issue inherent to the code itself, it's going to have to eventually go back to the software developer to either fix performance issues or get rid of some bugs. The other thing is where you pull your software down from. So Git repositories, where have you, they often have files in there that can give you known issues, known resolutions where you can do. And finally, you always have the help desk to rely on. And the help desk, it could be that you're under your rope and you just need to go straight there, and that's fine too. So identify kind of the most appropriate resources. Kind of talked about it in the last slide. So you kind of want to stick close to home. If there are things that you can resolve quickly, in the time it takes you to write an email to a help desk, you may be able to resolve the problem already. So use yourself, use your colleagues for sanity checks, for legacy code in the lab. Use your favorite web browser for like Slurm error messages. The Slurm is well documented. If you Google the error message, it'll tell you right away what exactly your problem is. We'll talk about some of the Slurm error messages that we see, but I only have a sampling of it, so you may see some more. Pretty much once it gets beyond what yourself, your colleagues, or the web, where they are the experts. Oh, that's the other thing I should mention. On the web, you should make sure that whatever you're going to is a good resource. If you're writing a research paper and you're going to cite someone's work, you're not just going to, Google someone and say, oh, well, he said, the sky is black, and type that down. You're going to make sure that you can verify the information that you provided and it's a reliable resources. Same thing when you're looking for help. Make sure you have a reliable resource. So when you want to go externally and beyond yourself is, again, when it's a software specific error or bug. You can go to the GitHub documentation. Like I said, there are community forums. There's also there's a help desk specific to the specific software providers. When you want to come to the help desk or the resource provider is when it's specific either to the system itself, if it happens to be a performance issue that might be related, again, to the system itself or how we've set up our environment, or again, if you're just at the end of your rope, we're happily there to help talk you down. So when you come to the help desk, as mentioned, well, I didn't mention this before, but let me say it for all my colleagues. The help desk is exceptional, but you should consider them general practitioners. While there are specialists in the group in certain areas, for the majority of the stuff that we're getting tickets on, we're not the specialists in that area. Again, we've seen a lot of things. We've talked to a lot of people. We have contacts in various areas, but you probably have more information or you have more knowledge on your specific area than we know. So it's really important that you provide us with enough information so that we can help investigating right away. Again, by the ticket iterating back and forth, it takes time. And for the help desk user to come back to your ticket after sending it will take time. So making sure when you first send it to them, a couple things that they should have are perhaps your username, which system you're on. Here at SDSC, we've gotten tickets for systems that are not only in our center, but somewhere else on campus altogether. So if we know that right away, we can easily send you to the correct place. A job ID is really useful, and in a few more slides, I'll give some details on how that's helpful. And also providing the specific error message. That helps us know, that helps us also kind of triage where you're at and what's going on. Another important thing is that the user with the problem should always submit the help desk ticket. Very often we'll have PIs submit tickets for their students. And in some help desk ticketing, the CCs don't get all the correspondence. So if the user who has the most knowledge about the problem is in the top of it, then we can make sure that we're interacting directly with the person who has the most knowledge. Excuse me, if it has to go to the PI and the PI has to talk to the user, and again, it's just more time and you're losing stuff. You're losing time, and time is money. So the last thing I'm going to say about working with the help desk, be patient and always be nice to the support desk. So some of the useful information that you provide us is the resource and the username. From resource and username, we can look up a lot of things. We can see if you're on our system. We can see what you have access to, how long you've been on there. We can check your history of running jobs, a lot of stuff. If you have a specific error to a specific job, then giving us the job ID is really important. So depending on if the job is running or not running, we can get different information, but it's still really important to have that job ID. If the job is running, we can see the working directory, the location of the error and output files. We know what project you're working on. We know when the start time is and the end time is, and we know what resources you requested. So if the job is already completed, then we won't have information about the working directory, the error file, and the out file. So it's important that you provide us with the exact submit script that was used to produce the error and out files. So generally, I suggest that you send us the location of those files versus copying and pasting them into the ticket, because sometimes copy and paste causes some errors and adds And so just stupid adding an extra hash or adding a line return or something could affect how it runs. And so reducing the amount of confusion over things that really are irrelevant is best. So let's talk about some specific issues on our resources. Many of you have already dealt with the access issues. I mentioned in my previous talk that at SDSE on the Expanse machine, we do not provide user-specific passwords. However, we do have on the SDSE machines user-specific usernames. We use a federated type of access so that we use either Exceed credentials or UCSD credentials for people to log in. However, the username that is at Exceed and the username that is on the system can be different. As you all know, your train accounts are your Exceed allocation and your XDTR are your SDSE allocations. So when this problem happens, the error message you're going to see is enter verification code. And generally what that means is it doesn't exist. The account you're trying to access doesn't exist on the system, which means we either didn't set it up or your username just doesn't exist. The other way to get in is using SSH keys. So with SSH keys, as was mentioned before, is you have a key pair. You have your private key on the system that you're on, and you have your public key on the system that you're going to. When the error message, so you need to pay pretty good attention to what the error message you're going and how those error messages come in. So if you SSH in using SSH keys and the first thing says enter passphrase and you type in the passphrase and then it pops up and says enter password, that's indicating that it knows that you have SSH keys, but that the password that you're using is not correct. You cannot change your passphrase on a set of SSH keys. So your two options are to remember the correct passphrase or to just generate a new set of SSH keys. The other issue is with entering when it gets to enter password, if that's your first prompt when you send the SSH keys, it means that it's not seeing the pairing, basically. And this could happen for a couple of reasons. Very often in our tickets, users will copy and paste the public key for us, and we will then copy and paste it into the authorized users file. However, sometimes copy and paste can cause errors. If there's any line returns, any spaces, usually we know kind of how it should look, so we can kind of tweak it to try and make it fit. But if it doesn't work, the best option is to actually send the actual file, so the .pub file to us in its entirety, and then we can drop that in immediately. Another problem that people have is that they're unable to access the system. A couple error messages that could come are that it will just time out, or it's something like blocked by system or something. I apologize. I can't remember right now what the exact message is, but make sure you check what the specific error message is. If it's saying that user has been logged out by system, it means that we have probably kicked you out for some reason. The best way to figure out what's going on would be to check the user news or send us an email. User news currently is available on the Exceed portal, but as we transition to Access, this will change. So what I strongly encourage is first you can go to the portal itself, but if you subscribe to the news, you'll actually get emails on the user news. And at this time, if you subscribe to the Exceed news, then we will be able to take those, send you information of how you should get news in the future. So common issues has to do with job submissions. When you initially submit your job, if it pops back an error message initially, it will usually be 2 lines. The first 2 higher bullets, the SBatch error, indicate the specific error message that you're getting, But you'll always get that second line too that says batch job submission failed, job violated something. So all that means pretty much is that you're requesting something, you're asking for something that is not passing the job filter. So the first error literally is saying you don't have enough balance left to run your job. And there can be numerous reasons why you might not have enough balance. First, you could be submitting to a project that is to the wrong project. Many users will have multiple different projects. Some projects have more time, some projects have less time. It could also be that project balance. It could also be that when your project balance is not enough, is that you're running in. I'm sorry, I don't know where my second point was there. But the second question is QoS max node per limit job. Depending on the queue that you're submitting to, we have specific limits set. So it will allow you, so in the shared queue, this is specific to the shared queue, this error, we only allow you to submit to one node. So if you're requesting 2 nodes in the shared queue, this is the error message you'll get. Many of these error messages will have to do with the queues and partitions. It could also have with the time limits. The time limits are also associated with the queues and partitions that we have. So one way to find out about the top with the balance is not enough is we can use the Expanse client tool. Mary mentioned the Expanse client tool before. So if you can't remember anything about the Expanse client tool to run specific commands, just type Expanse client and it'll give you all the information about it. The 2 important commands that you're going to want to use with this tool are project and user. Most likely, in a lot of cases, people won't know what their projects are off the top of their head. So by running the Expanse client user command, it will return everything that you have access to on the default resource. One of the things to know at SDSC is we have 4 unique resources here that we allow people to, or that we give allocations on. There's Expanse GPU, Expanse Industry, and Expanse Industry GPU. Each of those are allocated separately. So if you submit to a queue that doesn't belong to that resource, you'll get an error message. Another thing to take into consideration is that when users are added to the system, users and groups are updated hourly. The allocations themselves of how much is available to the allocation is updated every 4 hours. However, the usage is banked in the official database overnight. However, when you're running jobs, the Slurm database does keep kind of a working tally of what you have submitted, what is currently running, and what's currently running. And we'll hold on to that. So if you submit for a job that you will only be able to use the resources that are available. The one other thing to note is that we kind of cache the kind of the bank. So every 10 minutes that'll update. So if you only have an allocation for 100 SUs and you submit for 3 jobs, each requesting 30 SUs, when you try and submit the 4th job, even if you cancel those first 3 jobs, the 4th job will be rejected because it doesn't think you have enough time. Because essentially that 4th job makes you to have 120 SUs in the bank that you requested. So in some cases, you may just have to wait a little bit. If you wait for 10 minutes, the history will clear out and you can submit the job again. So talking about queues and time limits, as I mentioned before, we have the 4 resources. As you can see on the right-hand side, our system's pretty full. So the light blue tells you everything that's currently allocated. The little bit of darker blue means that the resources is probably in a shared state. That means some of the cores on the node are running, but not all of them. The dark blue way at the top, that's what's idle. So one of the things to consider when you're submitting job scripts is to only request the resources that you need and not extra, because you'll backfill quicker. I mentioned time limits and queues. So here are the queues. You can see in the second column, we do have max wall times for each of these. There are cases where we can extend these. If you need to extend them, you need to send a help desk ticket and we can help extend them. However, we evaluate each case for extending jobs on a per case basis. So we don't give blanket, you can run as long as you want type things. So we mentioned the partitions. So this compute partition allows you to run on the regular compute nodes. You can also use the shared partition, which is also on the shared compute nodes. The IND compute, if you don't have an allocation on the industry rack, you will not be able to run in this partition. The other things to note here are the max nodes per job, the max running jobs, and the max running and queued jobs. So that was when I mentioned that when sometimes your code will be rejected because you have too many jobs already in the queue. It should be noted that the limit applies per your group, not necessarily per you as an individual. So another thing to consider, a common question we get is, why am I being charged for what I'm being charged for? And you're being charged based on what you are requesting and not how the resources are used. So when you request a compute node, you're requesting all 128 cores. So if you request 128 cores for 1 hour, you're going to be charged 128 SUs. However, if you're only using one core on that compute node, it's recommended that you use the shared partition, because then you can request one core for 1 hour and you're only going to be charged 1 SU for essentially the same job. Reasons why you might want to be on the specific node or request the whole thing is if you're doing performance evaluation, but generally with the research we're doing, that's not in most cases, people don't need that. So the other thing to take into consideration, we allocate the resources based on the individual resources. So each node, we consider both the CPU time and the memory that's available on there. So if you need just one core, but you need more memory, you're going to be charged for either the max of the memory or the CPU core fraction. One other big consideration that you should take in mind is the minimum charge that you charge, or the minimum charge for any job. So if you run a really short job that runs for 5 seconds, it uses 1 core, it's going to be charged 1 SU. 1 SU, 1 service unit, is 1 core for 1 hour. So if you run a job for 5 seconds on 1 SU, or a job for 60 minutes, it's going to be the same charge. So if you have a lot of little tiny jobs, you're going to want to bundle those together so that you submit only one job. So job status. Mary mentioned in her first talk that when you do your dispatch and submit and it returns a job ID, then you're good. Well, you're kind of good. That means that we accept the job. It doesn't necessarily mean that your job is going to run. If you get into a state and you're at a point where your job hasn't run when you expected it to run, you can use the SQ command, and you can do it for your username. I did it for everything so I could get kind of a sampling of different errors. And what we see is that there's a bunch that are in pending state, and the last column tells you why it's in a pending state. So the first 2 is the max mem per limit. On our resources, while all the nodes have 256 gigs per node, because the system needs to use some of those resources to actually run the stuff in the background, we actually allocate or make a little less available to the users. So if you're asking for that full 256, you're going to have this error and the job's never going to run. The other thing that all of you might run into is that if you copy the submit scripts that you're using this week, they're all tied to a reservation. If you try and run jobs past this week, they will never run because it's always going to be looking for that reservation. So make sure you take out that reservation directive. So these last 2 kind of indicate that the job or the group is using beyond the resources that are allowed to use. So you shouldn't take for the top two, you need to actually remove your job and fix the submit script. But on the last three, you just kind of need to wait. When other jobs clear out, these will pop in. And then I just wanted to show running jobs. On the running jobs, when you do the SQ command, it shows you exactly which nodes that you're running on. If needed, when you are running on the job, you're able to directly log into those nodes, but only when you're specifically running. So I talked a little bit about the reasons. So the max mem per node is 243 that we allowed. The max node per user limit, this again had to do with the shared queue. In the shared queue, we only allowed people to run on one node, less than one node. So actually in shared queue, you can't request all 128 cores. Another reason that shows up a lot will be priority. So depending on how often you run and the users in your group have run, your priority will can diminish over time. If you run a lot of jobs in quick recession, your priority is going to diminish. However, as your job ages, that priority increases. And so definitely if priority is the issue you have, just leave it in. It will age well and run eventually. If the reason is requested node not available, and it'll say which nodes aren't available, usually this has to do that we have a system maintenance, and so we put a reservation in place. If we have a reservation for tomorrow and you request a job that is supposed to run for 2 days, it will actually hold any jobs that cannot fit in before the reservation time. Another issue that we've had that isn't one of the reasons, but when submitting jobs is we had some Lustre issues, and sometimes they're specific to specific nodes. So we've added a Slurm directive that you can add a constraint onto your batch script that specifies if you are going to use Lustre or not. If you have that constraint in there, the job schedule will ensure that you never run on a node where before the job starts, the Lustre file system is missing. If you don't have this constraint and for some reason Lustre goes out, while for a lot of the time it should be no problem because Lustre should be available, if Lustre is not available, it'll pop on and immediately fail. So adding this will help make sure that you don't inadvertently lose options. And again, when it's in the queue, it's going to wait until that resource is available. So it's just a waiting game. So another very common issue is people looking for software or looking to install software. There are a couple places you can check. Currently, the Exceed portal has a software page, but this is not comprehensive at this time. I'm guessing that Access will also have a software page, but like with the resource or your usage on the system, where you're going to find the most up-to-date information is going to be on the system itself, not on the kind of overarching umbrella organizations portal. So if you're looking for particular software on the system, you can use the module spider command, and this is going to list all the packages that we have available. If you're looking for a particular package, you can use the module spider and this particular package name, and that will let you know if it's there and what you need to, or what modules you're going to need to install to use that package. If you need software installs and you contact the help desk, there's a couple options we have for you. First, we can help you install it into your home directory. Second, we can maybe provide you with a makefile that allows you to install it if you have your own version of certain software. And lastly, if for some reason it doesn't fit with the environment that we have, you can use Singularity containers to install the software and make it available to you. Also included, as mentioned before, if there's a software specific issue, most likely we might have to go back to the software developers themselves to help figure out what the issues are. So in review, it's really important that you understand your problem, engage with the appropriate people and support tools to make sure you get the quickest turnaround. And when you do engage with other people, make sure you provide relevant information to reduce the iterations you have with them. Again, to reduce your frustration and get the quickest turnaround time. And I'll repeat, always be nice to the support desk. So let me know if there's any questions and I'll stop sharing and check on the Slack.